This winter, California's power grid is heading toward a crisis that could bring rolling blackouts back to millions of homes and businesses. The warning signs are flashing red across every major grid monitoring system. Energy experts who've spent decades analyzing California's electricity infrastructure are using words like catastrophic failure and unprecedented risk. This isn't about peak summer demand anymore. This is about basic winter reliability when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. California shut down its last major nuclear plant in 2025, eliminating 2,200 megawatts of always-on baseload power. Natural gas plants are being retired faster than renewables can replace them. And now, with winter approaching, the state is discovering that solar panels and wind turbines can't keep the lights on when Californians need them most. Grid operators are quietly preparing for rolling blackouts that could last days, not hours. Emergency protocols are being updated. Backup systems are being tested. The question isn't whether California's grid will fail this winter. The question is, how badly? And for how long? California's electrical grid is facing its most dangerous winter in decades, with energy officials warning that rolling blackouts could return as renewable energy sources fail to meet demand during the state's least sunny and windiest months. Here's what's happening right now. California generates about 25% of its electricity from solar power during peak conditions. But winter solar output drops by 60% compared to summer levels. Days are shorter, skies are cloudier, and solar panels operate at reduced efficiency in cooler temperatures. Wind power, which supplies another 7% of the state's electricity, becomes equally unreliable during winter months when high-pressure systems create calm weather patterns. The California Independent System Operator, known as CAISO, manages the state's power grid for 39 million people. Internal CAISO documents obtained by industry analysts show growing concern about winter grid stability. The agency has already issued preliminary warnings about potential supply shortfalls during December and January peak demand periods. Electricity demand doesn't disappear in winter, it shifts. Air conditioning loads drop, but heating, lighting, and indoor activity increase substantially. Electric vehicle charging peaks during evening hours when solar production is zero. Commercial and industrial facilities maintain steady power consumption regardless of season. The result is significant winter demand that renewable sources simply cannot meet reliably. California's baseload power generation has been systematically dismantled over the past 5 years. Baseload refers to power plants that run continuously, providing steady electricity regardless of weather conditions. Nuclear and natural gas plants traditionally filled this role. But the state's energy policies have prioritized renewable sources while shutting down reliable backup systems. Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant provided 2,200 megawatts of carbon-free baseload electricity for nearly 40 years. It supplied roughly 6% of California's total power generation and operated at over 90% capacity factor, meaning it ran nearly continuously. The plant was decommissioned in 2025 as part of California's renewable energy transition. That baseload capacity was supposed to be replaced by renewable sources, but the replacement hasn't materialized at scale. Natural gas power plants are being retired or converted to renewable fuels faster than grid planners anticipated. These plants historically provided backup power during low renewable production periods. Without them, the grid lacks the flexibility to respond to sudden demand spikes or renewable energy drops. Emergency backup systems that once covered temporary shortfalls no longer exist in sufficient numbers. Battery storage was supposed to solve the renewable energy reliability problem. California has invested billions in grid-scale battery systems designed to store excess solar power during the day and release it during evening peak hours. But current battery capacity can only sustain the grid for a few hours during high demand. Winter's extended low production periods require days or weeks of stored energy, far beyond current battery capabilities. The interstate power market that California depends on for emergency electricity is also changing. Neighboring states are developing their own renewable energy mandates and retiring fossil fuel plants. Arizona, Nevada, and other western states that once exported excess power to California now face their own grid reliability challenges. The regional power sharing agreements that historically prevented California blackouts may not be available during widespread regional shortfalls. Industrial electricity users are already receiving early warnings from utility companies about potential winter service interruptions. Manufacturing facilities, data centers, and other large power consumers are being advised to prepare backup generation systems and flexible operating schedules. These industrial demand response programs require businesses to reduce consumption during grid stress periods in exchange for lower electricity rates. Residential customers face different risks. Rolling blackouts prioritize essential services like hospitals and emergency systems. But residential neighborhoods typically lose power first during grid emergencies. Unlike summer blackouts that last a few hours during peak air conditioning demand, winter blackouts could extend longer as renewable sources remain unavailable for consecutive days during weather events. This crisis stems from a fundamental mismatch between California's energy policies and physical reality. The state committed to ambitious renewable energy targets without adequately planning for grid reliability during low renewable production periods. First, the renewable energy transition timeline was too aggressive for current technology. California mandated that utilities source 60% of electricity from renewable sources by 2030, with 100% carbon-free electricity by 2045. These targets assumed that battery storage technology would advance faster than it actually has. Current lithium-ion battery systems remain expensive, have limited storage duration, and degrade over time. Grid-scale storage, sufficient for multi-day winter periods, would require battery installations costing hundreds of billions of dollars. Second, the retirement of baseload power plants outpaced renewable deployment. Environmental regulations and political pressure forced nuclear and natural gas plant closures based on renewable replacement promises that weren't fulfilled. Diablo Canyon's closure eliminated more reliable generation than all of California's new solar installations in 2025 combined. The math simply doesn't work when you remove guaranteed power and replace it with weather-dependent sources. Third, grid interconnection bureaucracy has slowed renewable energy projects significantly. New solar and wind installations require extensive environmental reviews, grid connection studies, and regulatory approvals that take years to complete. Many renewable projects approved in principle remain unbuilt due to permitting delays, supply chain problems, or financing challenges. The gap between planned renewable capacity and actual online generation continues to widen. Fourth, energy storage economics remain problematic. Grid-scale batteries must be replaced every 10 to 15 years, creating ongoing capital costs that utilities pass on to consumers. Battery installations also require significant rare earth materials that create their own environmental and supply chain issues. The total cost of renewable plus storage systems exceeds traditional baseload generation for most applications, making large-scale deployment financially challenging. Fifth, peak winter demand patterns don't align with renewable production patterns. Solar power generates maximum output during midday hours when winter electricity demand is typically lowest. Evening peak demand occurs after sunset, when solar production is zero and wind patterns are often calm. Battery storage must bridge not just a few peak hours, but extended periods when renewable sources produce insufficient power for basic grid stability. Weather dependency creates unavoidable reliability problems. California's renewable energy production can drop by 80% during high-pressure weather systems that bring clear but calm conditions. These weather patterns can persist for a week or more during winter months. No amount of battery storage currently deployed can cover extended renewable energy droughts of this duration. The state's regulatory framework prioritizes environmental goals over grid reliability. The California Public Utilities Commission and other agencies evaluate energy projects based primarily on carbon emissions rather than grid stability metrics. This regulatory approach has systematically favored intermittent renewable sources, while blocking or delaying projects that could provide backup power during renewable shortfalls. Federal environmental regulations compound the problem. Natural gas power plants face increasingly strict emission standards that make operation expensive and retrofitting prohibitively costly. Many plant operators choose closure rather than compliance with regulations that change frequently and require constant capital investment for minimal environmental benefit. 3 scenarios could unfold this winter, and none of them offer much comfort for California residents and businesses. The worst-case scenario involves extended rotating blackouts across multiple regions. A high-pressure weather system could reduce renewable energy production to 20% of normal levels for a week or more during peak winter demand. Battery storage would be exhausted within hours. Neighboring states would be unable to provide emergency power due to their own demand or renewable energy shortfalls. CAISO would implement Stage 3 emergency protocols, cutting power to residential and commercial customers on a rotating basis. Some areas could experience blackouts for 12 to 18 hours per day until weather conditions improve or emergency fossil fuel generators come online. The base case scenario features frequent, shorter blackouts and widespread demand reduction programs. Grid operators would proactively cut power to non-essential users during anticipated renewable energy shortfalls. Businesses would face mandatory closure orders during peak demand hours. Residential customers would experience 4 to 6 hour blackouts several times per week during the worst winter months. Electricity prices would spike during peak hours as utilities activate expensive backup generation. Economic damage would mount as businesses lose productivity and residents face home heating challenges. The best-case scenario requires unusually favorable winter weather with above-average wind and solar production. Even under these conditions, the grid would operate with minimal reserves and frequent emergency alerts. Any equipment failures, demand spikes, or weather disruptions would immediately trigger blackout protocols. Utilities would implement aggressive conservation campaigns and industrial demand reduction programs to maintain basic grid stability. Residents would face higher electricity bills and constant uncertainty about power availability. Electricity prices will increase substantially, regardless of which scenario occurs. Utilities will activate expensive peaking power plants and emergency generators that cost 10 to 20 times more than baseload power. These costs get passed directly to consumers through rate increases and emergency surcharges. Industrial users facing blackout threats will install backup generation systems, adding costs that ultimately flow to consumers through higher prices for goods and services. Economic consequences extend far beyond utility bills. Data centers and technology companies that power California's economy require extremely reliable electricity. Extended blackouts could force these businesses to relocate operations to states with more stable power grids. Manufacturing facilities may shut down during blackout periods rather than risk equipment damage from power fluctuations. Agricultural operations face unique vulnerabilities during winter blackouts. Dairy farms, greenhouse operations, and food processing facilities require continuous power for refrigeration and climate control. Even short blackouts can cause massive food spoilage and livestock management problems. Rural areas typically experience longer blackout duration due to their lower priority in emergency power restoration protocols. The employment implications are staggering. Businesses that can't operate reliably during blackouts will reduce staff, delay expansions, or relocate to other states. Restaurant and retail operations lose revenue during every blackout hour. Service businesses like healthcare, education, and finance face operational disruptions that compound over time. California's already challenging business environment becomes even less competitive when companies can't count on basic electrical service. Grid instability also threatens California's electric vehicle adoption goals. EV charging becomes impossible during blackouts, stranding electric car owners and undermining public confidence in electric transportation. The state's EV infrastructure investments become worthless if the electrical grid can't reliably support charging networks. Emergency services face unprecedented challenges during winter blackouts. Hospitals rely on backup generators, but extended blackouts exhaust fuel supplies and strain equipment. Police and fire departments struggle with communication systems and facility operations during power outages. Emergency response times increase when traffic signals fail and emergency services operate on backup power. If you live or work in California, this electrical grid crisis affects your daily life directly. Here's what you can do to prepare for potential winter blackouts. Identify backup power options for your home and workplace. Portable generators, battery backup systems, or solar panels with battery storage can provide limited power during blackouts. Research local regulations for generator installation and operation, as some areas restrict generator use due to noise or emissions concerns. Calculate your essential power needs for lighting, heating, refrigeration, and communications equipment. Plan for heating alternatives during extended blackouts. Electric heating systems become useless during power outages, leaving many California homes without heat during winter weather. Wood-burning fireplaces, propane heaters, or other non-electric heating sources could become essential. Ensure proper ventilation and safety equipment for any alternative heating methods you consider. Prepare communication and information systems that work without grid power. Charge portable devices regularly and maintain backup battery packs. Consider getting a battery-powered radio for emergency information when internet and cellular services face power disruptions. Develop communication plans with family and employers for blackout scenarios. Stock essential supplies for multi-day blackouts. Non-perishable food, bottled water, medications, flashlights, batteries, and first aid supplies become crucial during extended power outages. Calculate needs for several days without refrigeration, cooking, or normal household operations. Consider the needs of elderly family members or those with medical equipment requiring electricity. Understand your local blackout protocols and priority schedules. CAISO and local utilities publish emergency procedures that explain which areas lose power first during grid emergencies. Hospitals, emergency services, and essential infrastructure receive priority power restoration. Residential neighborhoods typically experience longer blackout duration than commercial districts. Adjust energy usage patterns to reduce grid stress. Use major appliances during midday hours when solar production is highest. Delay non-essential electrical activities until off-peak hours. Preheat or pre-cool your home during high renewable production periods. These individual actions collectively reduce peak demand stress on the electrical grid. Monitor grid status and renewable energy production in real time. CAISO provides public data on electricity demand, renewable generation, and grid stress levels. Understanding current grid conditions can help you anticipate potential blackouts and plan activities accordingly. Several smartphone apps track California grid status and send emergency alerts. Consider relocating business operations during high-risk periods. Companies with flexible operations might reduce California activities during winter months when blackout risks peak. Remote work arrangements can reduce commercial electricity demand while maintaining business productivity. Some businesses are establishing backup operations in other states specifically to avoid California grid reliability problems. Advocate for grid reliability improvements through political engagement. Contact state representatives about the need for baseload power generation and grid stability investments. Support candidates who prioritize electrical system reliability alongside environmental goals. Vote in local elections where utility regulations and energy policies get decided. Don't rely entirely on official reassurances about grid stability. Government agencies and utility companies have political and financial incentives to downplay blackout risks. Monitor independent grid analysis and prepare for scenarios worse than official predictions. California's track record on infrastructure management suggests that official optimism often exceeds actual performance. Here's what we know for certain. California's electrical grid faces its most dangerous winter in decades as renewable energy sources prove inadequate for reliable winter power generation. The closure of Diablo Canyon nuclear plant eliminated 2,200 megawatts of baseload power that renewable sources cannot replace during low production periods. Natural gas backup plants are being retired faster than battery storage systems can compensate for renewable energy gaps. Grid operators are quietly preparing for rolling blackouts that could affect millions of Californians for extended periods during winter weather events. Current battery storage technology cannot bridge the multi-day renewable energy droughts that occur during high-pressure weather systems. Neighboring states may be unable to provide emergency power as they face their own grid reliability challenges from similar renewable energy policies. The economic consequences extend far beyond higher electricity bills. Businesses requiring reliable power may relocate to other states, taking jobs and tax revenue with them. Agricultural operations, healthcare facilities, and essential services face operational disruptions that compound over time. California's competitive disadvantage in energy reliability threatens the state's long-term economic prospects. Winter blackouts aren't a possibility anymore. They're a mathematical certainty given California's current energy infrastructure and weather dependency. The only questions are how severe, how long, and how often these blackouts will occur during the coming winter months. The state's renewable energy transition was implemented without adequate planning for grid reliability during low renewable production periods. Environmental goals took priority over basic electrical service reliability, creating a crisis that threatens both environmental progress and economic stability. California residents and businesses now face the consequences of energy policies that ignored fundamental physics and engineering realities. What do you think happens when California's lights start going out? Will state officials finally acknowledge the grid reliability crisis, or will they continue blaming external factors for infrastructure failures they created? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And make sure to subscribe for updates as this winter energy crisis unfolds. The real test of California's renewable energy experiment is about to begin. And millions of Californians are about to find out whether ideology can keep the lights on when reality comes calling.